Let's go over the materials that we'll be needing for this tutorial. This top is made with a number 4 worsted weight yarn, and the fiber that I'll be using is the Normal Yarns Subame, which is listed as a number 4 roving worsted yarn. And to go along with our worsted weight yarn, I will also be using a 5.0 millimeter crochet hook. We will also be needing a measuring tape, 4 stitch markers, and a darning needle for weaving in our ends. Very basic materials. Let's go ahead and jump into the tutorial. To begin, I'm going to start by creating an even numbered chain, and I want this chain to reach around my neck from one collarbone to the next. I've laid the chain across my shoulders, making sure that it reaches from the top of my collarbones. So I've just created a chain of 48, and for my body size, this wraps around my neck perfectly. Now to go ahead and start the row, I do want to chain an additional 3 because I want my chain of 3 to count as my first double crochet. So what I'm going to do for row 1 is yarn over and skip the first 3 chains in my row, and then insert my hook into the 4th chain through the back bump on the back side. And now I can work my next double crochet. So just a quick little recap again, the chain of 3 counts as my first double crochet, and now I've just worked my second double crochet of the row. And now for the rest of row 1, I'm just going to be picking up every single chain space and working 1 double crochet. So again, I'm going to yarn over, find the next chain space in the row, pick up that back bump, and work a normal double crochet. And just repeat this until the very end of your chain. Now that I finished crocheting row 1, this next portion involves a little bit of eyeballing and freestyle. So what I want to do is fold in the corners of the top just onto each other like this. So just a little bit on each side, because again, we do want to leave a rather large opening to create that V neckline. And what I want to do is place a stitch marker not only on this front panel right here, but I also want to place a stitch marker on the corresponding back side. And what we're going to do is work our raglan increases at each of the stitch markers, but I also want to be working an increase onto this very last stitch in the row. Now, depending on the style of V-neck that you want, you can either work an increase on these corners on every single row, which is going to give you a little bit more of a closed neck. You're not going to have too much skin showing, but personally what I want to do is work an increase on every other row on this very last stitch so that we have a little bit more of like a deeper V-neck, a little bit more chest showing. So there are 2 different ways that you can go about making this V-neck. So I'm just going to take a moment here and find a nice little spot somewhere around right here to place my stitch marker, and then I'm going to match it on the back side. And once I have those placed, I can go ahead, count the same amount of stitches and repeat it along the other corner. I've just got done placing my stitch markers, and for my body size, I've chosen to place a stitch marker into the 4th stitch from the edge of my work, and then I counted out another 7 stitches and placed my 2nd stitch marker right here. So likewise, I'm just going to head over to the other side and repeat the same thing. Again, for my size, I've chosen into the 4th stitch from the edge of my work to place my 1st stitch marker, and then I counted out another 7 and placed my 2nd stitch marker. So all in all, when the top is laying up against itself, you'll notice that those 2 stitch markers do match on the front and the back. And now we can go ahead and begin working on row 2. I'm going to start off row 2 by chaining 3, and this chain of 3 counts as my first double crochet, so I can turn my work. And as I stated earlier, I do want to work an increase onto the first and the last stitch in the row on every other row. So here for row 2, I'm going to yarn over and work a 2nd double crochet right into that very first stitch. So now we have the chain of 3 and another double crochet coming out of that very first stitch. And from here, I'm going to yarn over and place 1 double crochet into every single stitch until I reach my stitch marker. So yarn over, find the next stitch, pick up both 2 top loops, and work a standard double crochet. Now for my top, I'm already approaching my very first stitch marker, and as I stated earlier, we will be working the raglan increases into every single stitch that we have our stitch marker placed. So for our raglan increase, I'm going to yarn over and insert into that stitch marker place. And what I'm going to do is work a double crochet, chain 1, yarn over, and 1 more double crochet all into the exact same stitch. So this is how we are going to work our raglan increases, nice and simple. Again, we have a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, all coming out of that same exact stitch. And from this point, I can just carry on working 1 double crochet into the next stitch, and then 1 double crochet into every single stitch that I have until I reach my next stitch marker. I'm starting to approach my next little stitch marker. So here is my last double crochet, and here is my next stitch marker place. So once more, I'm gonna place a double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet all into that same stitch. There's my chain 1, and then go right back in for my next double crochet. So here we have the next raglan increase, and then I can just repeat this pattern until the end of my row. So once more, pick up every single stitch that you have and work just 1 double crochet. And when you hit your stitch marker places, you can work your raglan increase. So I'm starting to come up here to the very end of row 2, but as you'll notice, I've already worked all of my raglan increases. So I have 1, 2, 3, and here is my last and final raglan increase. But now here at my very last stitch in the row, I still need to work this stitch, but keep in mind, I also want to place an increase into this chain 3. So here is my final stitch in the row, and now I have to work that increase. I'm going to go right back into that stitch place and match the beginning of the row with the end of the row. So now we have an increase into the last stitch, and we also have an increase into that very first stitch. So let's go ahead, chain 3, and turn our work. And in regards to our increases, every time that you place the double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet, you want to move your stitch marker into the chain space in between those 2 double crochets. And this is just going to help you mark and signify where your next future increase is going to be placed. Now, I personally don't like leaving my stitch markers in just because they kind of make a lot of noise. So I'm going to remove mine. But for those of you who like to keep your stitch markers in, just make sure to move them up on every single row into that chain space. Now for row 3 and all odd numbered rows, we are not going to have any increases. And for rows 2, 4, 6, and all of my even numbered rows, that is where I will work an increase. So here for row 3, I already have my chain 3 coming out of my first stitch. So now I can yarn over and look for the next available double crochet, which is right here. I'm going to insert and pick up both 2 top loops and work 1 double crochet. And then again, yarn over, look for my next stitch in the row. And then here I can place my next stitch. And I'm just going to continue to repeat 1 double crochet into every single double crochet available until I reach my raglan. So as you can see, I'm starting to come up onto that raglan increase, but I still have 1 more double crochet. So I'm going to work 1 more stitch directly on top of that. And now here at my first increase where my chain space is, I'm going to work my next raglan increase. So I'm going to insert directly into this huge open space right here and place a double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet all into that chain space. So all of your raglan increases should be worked directly on top of each other, just like this. And now at this point, I can yarn over and look for the next double crochet, which is right here, and work 1 double crochet across the entire row. So wherever I have a double crochet, we're going to place 1 double crochet into that stitch. And wherever I have a chain space, I will work my raglan increase. Right here, I still have 1 more double crochet. So work into that stitch. And now here I have the chain space in between these 2 double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over and go directly into this open gap right here beneath the chain 1 and work a raglan increase. So double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet. So here is another raglan increase stacked directly on top of the one prior. And once again, I can find the next double crochet and work 1 stitch across. As I'm coming up here to the end of row 3, I still have a few more stitches to work. So here is my second to last stitch. And now here at my very last double crochet in the row, which is the chain 3, I'm going to yarn over and pick up the 2 top loops in that chain 3 and work, oh my gosh, it's so tight, work 1 double crochet. So again, for row 3, we don't have any increases on this very last stitch. We're just ending the row with 1 double crochet, and we also started the row with 1 singular double crochet. So at this point I can go ahead, chain 3 and turn my work. Now row 4 is going to be a repeat of row 2, and again, our even numbered rows, we will have an increase into the first stitch of the row and an increase into the last stitch. So here after my chain 3, I'm going to yarn over and go right back into that very first stitch in the row. So picking up the first stitch, and now I have 2 double crochet coming out of my first stitch. And now from here I can just continue on with the basic pattern. So I'm going to work 1 double crochet into every single stitch in my row. And then I will work a raglan increase into the chain spaces. So here is my very first raglan increase in the row, and here is my chain space. So once more I will work that raglan increase directly into that chain space. We have the double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet all coming out of that same stitch space. So here we have it. All 3 raglan increases are placed directly on top of each other. And now at this point I can shift back to the standard pattern. So pick up every double crochet in the row and work 1 stitch across. And when I approach my next chain space, I can work another raglan increase. Now that we're approaching the end of row 4, let's go ahead and work the last few stitches together. So I'm going to insert my hook and work the second to last double crochet. And now here we're coming up onto the very last stitch in the row, which is technically our chain 3. So what I'm going to do is work 2 double crochet into this chain 3 space. I'm going to pick up the top 2 loops on that chain 3 and work my first double crochet. And now again, I'm going to yarn over and go right back into that same stitch to work the increase. So this is going to be my second double crochet. Continue adding on rows following the pattern repeats from rows 2 and 3 until the corners of your top meet up at the center to form the V-neck. As your piece continues to grow longer, make sure to try the garment on and double check the length, the width, and the fit of it on your body. You want the start and the end of your last row to comfortably meet up at the center of your top, so continue to add on rows until this is accomplished. So at this point, I've worked up a few more rows, and as you'll notice, the center of my V-neck is just about to touch. So I just want to make sure that I try it on one last time and guarantee that I like the fit on my own body. So at this point, I've worked up a total of 12 rows for my own body size. And here at the end of my 12th row, you'll notice that I have an increase at the start and the end of my row. Now, in order to connect our little V-neck in the round, what I want to do is pick up here after my last increase stitch. What I want to do is reinsert my hook into this last and final stitch, and all I'm going to do is slip stitch it to the double crochet on the other corner of the V-neck so that this round is officially connected. Once we've created that slip stitch, I'm going to go ahead, cut my yarn, tie off a knot, and then I'm going to reattach my yarn to the center back panel. That way we don't see a change in colors across the front of our top. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I've just reinserted my hook back into my last and final stitch, and all I'm going to do is yarn over and chain 1 so that I have a little bit of space between our 2 stitches. And then at this point, I can go ahead and slip stitch into the very top of my chain 3. And this is going to be the very end of my row 12 and officially the connected round for the V-neck. So now I can go ahead, cut my yarn, and tie off a knot. I've just taken the time to attach my yarn to the center back panel. So there you can see we have the V-neck in the front side, and then here on the back side of the panel, I've just reattached my yarn into any stitch near the center. And at this point, I can reinsert and pull up a loop. And from this point to carry on with the pattern, I'm going to start with my chain of 3, and this does count as my first double crochet. So I'm going to ignore this first stitch, yarn over and look for the next stitch. And at this point, I just want to work 1 double crochet into every single stitch available. And I just want to add on as many rows as I need again until I can get the corners of my raglan to comfortably reach underneath my armpit. And at that point I can cut my yarn, make a new chain to attach my under armhole sections, and then carry on with the pattern. So this is kind of just a repeat of the rest of the pattern. All we have done is shifted our yarn to the back side of our panel. And of course, like always, when you come up to your little raglan increase, make sure that you continue on with that raglan pattern. So work 1 double crochet, chain 1, and 1 more double crochet into that little raglan increase stitch right there. So again, just 1 double crochet across the entire row, and work your raglan increases at all of your chain 1 spots. So I'm starting to approach my little V-neck section where we have already connected it in the round. So all I'm going to do is carry on with 1 double crochet into each available stitch. So now I'm working across that little increase section. And again, for right here, we're not going to be adding any increases. So where I have my chain 3 right here, also make sure to pick up that stitch because it counts as a double crochet. And now I'm at the point where I have chained 1 in between the 2 little sections right there. So I'm just going to place 1 double crochet into that chain 1 space. So there we have it. And now I can carry on to the other side of the panel. So picking back up with my next available double crochet and work 1 double crochet, another double crochet, and just carry on like this until the very end of your row, and make sure that you do slip stitch into the top of your chain 3 once you've made it back to the start of your round. All right, so I've just finished up this next row and I've slip stitched into my chain of 3 from the start of the row. So this is how the little raglan V-neck tee is coming together. As you'll notice, I only worked up 1 row, and at this point I think that the top fits me perfectly. I don't want to add any more increases to my raglan because it does hit just below my armpit. So what I want to do next is leave my yarn as it is right here. I'm just going to leave a super long tail because I do want to reconnect my yarn to this strand. But now I'm going to use this yarn to create some chains reaching from 1 raglan increase over here to the other side. I want my top to fit me a little bit more tight and snug, so I'm only going to create maybe like an inch long chain, 1.5 inches, and then connect it to my other raglan increase. And then I can go ahead and repeat that step over here on the other raglan side. So again, just attach your yarn directly into the raglan increase space where you have the chain 1, create the same amount of chains, and then slip stitch it into the other raglan increase, cut your yarn and tie a knot. And then ultimately we will come back, reattach our yarn to this little strand here, and then just continue working back and forth in the round. So I've just attached my yarn into the chain 1 space where I have my little raglan increase. I'm going to reinsert my hook, pull up a loop, and then I can just create any amount of chains that I would prefer. Like I said, I do want a more tight fit underneath the arms, so I'm only going to chain 5, and then I'm going to reach over and grab the matching raglan increase on the front panel, go into the chain 1 space or just below it, and then from here I can slip stitch my chain together. So if I go ahead and pull out my hook, this is how your work should look underneath your arms. Again, you can have even more chains than I do, but all in all, this is how your underarm section should look, nice and connected like that. And at this point, after my chain of 5 and my slip stitch, I'm just going to cut my yarn and tie off a knot, and then repeat these same steps over here. So attach my yarn into the chain 1 space, make my chain of 5, and then slip stitch it into the coordinating raglan increase on the front panel. Now that I have my underarm chains connected on both sides, I can go ahead and pick up at the very start of my row. But remember that we kept a super long tail because I do want to reattach my yarn. So I'm just going to do a little bit of like a magic join. I'm going to take my new yarn again, and then my old tail that's sitting right here. And all I'm going to do is take this fiber and tie on a knot right here. So we're just taking both ends and knotting them. So here's my first knot, and now I can take my other tail and make a secondary knot right here. Make sure that the knot is nice and tight. And now when I pull on the 2 long tails, our little knot is going to join up right here. So now our yarn is officially connected. I can go ahead and cut off these 2 remaining tails. just like so. So here's a nice little recap. Our yarn is knotted and connected right there. And all I'm gonna do at this point is reattach my hook into my little space right here. And then I can just begin working 1 double crochet across the entire row. To go ahead and begin the body rows of this top, I'm gonna start off with my chain of 3. And now I can turn my work. And for row 1, I just wanna place 1 double crochet into each stitch space available. So again, we're just gonna be working 1 double crochet across the back side of the panel. And then as I come up to my chain sections, we also wanna place 1 double crochet into each chain and then begin working across the front panel with, you guessed it again, 1 double crochet all the way across row 1. So I've just worked across one section of the back panel and I'm starting to come up to my chain spaces. So again, I'm just gonna be placing 1 double crochet into each stitch space available. And now you'll notice that we're starting to approach our under armpit chain, but right before I start working stitches into this chain, I also wanna place 1 last double crochet directly into the raglan increase. So where we connected the chain right here to our chain space between the 2 double crochets, I'm just gonna go right into that big open space right here and place 1 more double crochet. And I find that with my raglan patterns, placing 1 extra double crochet into the raglan space helps to eliminate a little bit of a gap between the body and the underarm sections. So now at this point, I can just begin placing 1 double crochet into each chain space available. So looking here at my first chain space, I do want to turn my work over and grab the back loop or the back bump. So there we have it. And now I can work 1 double crochet. And again, yarn over, picking up my second chain in a row, 1 double crochet, and just repeat this across your entire chain. And then here I can finish out my 5th double crochet across the chain. So this is how the under armpits should look. And just like we did when we approached the chain, I want to make sure that I place 1 more double crochet into the raglan increase space right here. So just place 1 additional double crochet. And now at this point I can carry on with 1 double crochet into each space available. So looking here for my next stitch, finding the next available double crochet and work 1 stitch. And again, another stitch. So just work 1 double crochet across your row. So let's take a quick little look again. We've worked across the back panel, underneath the armhole chain, and then now we are going to work across the front panel. So again, just work 1 double crochet into every single stitch across your front panel, and then repeat those same steps over here to your second underarm chain. And once you've completed this step, just continue placing your double crochets across the back panel, and then connect it with a slip stitch to your chain 3 at the end of your row. A quick little recap, this is what row 1 of the body should look like. So now at this point for rows 2 and 3 and so on for the body section, we're just going to continue to add on basic rows of double crochet. So at the end of every single row, make sure to chain 3 and then turn your work around. But we'll just be working across the back panel, the armholes, the front section, and then back around, connect our work, chain 3, and then work backwards. So we're always turning our work at the end of every single row. But that is pretty much the basis of this pattern. So at this point, I'm just going to continue to add on these basic rows of double crochet, and all I want to do is extend my top straight downwards. Towards the end of this pattern, if you guys would like, you can connect your yarn to the underarm section and then add on additional rows in the round to your sleeves. You can make this full length sleeve, 3/4 sleeve, or if you're like me, you want to leave it just as is like this. But that is essentially the basis of this pattern. Here I am trying on the top one last time just to double check that I like the fit of everything and that it's not too snug on me. I think I only have like 5 or 6 rows of the body right here. So yeah, I'm just double checking it and I do like the fit. So I'm gonna continue to add on rows. All right, so it's been a couple of days and as you can see, I added on just a few more rows to the body of my raglan top. So in total, after connecting the little V-neck in the round, I added on 15 rows. And for like a quick little measurement, let's go ahead and give you guys some specifics. From the very bottom to the very top of my shirt, I have almost 13 inches tall. I'm like just underneath about 12.75 inches. And from the very base of my top up to the V-neck portion, I have exactly 6.5 inches. So these are just the personal measurements that I'm going to stick with. I feel like this fits me perfectly. What I'm going to choose to do is attach my yarn to either one of these corners right here, and then just begin working some very basic single crochets down the V-neck, up the V-neck, and then back around the back side of the top and connect it in the round. I personally feel like this is just gonna add on a nice clean edge, because as you can see for our V-neck, it is just a little bit messy, especially with these chain 3s at the start of the row. So I'm just gonna go ahead and quickly add on a single crochet border to the V-neck, and then all that's left after that is to create a super long chain and then essentially thread it back and forth through any opening I can find all the way up to the very top. So I've just got done adding on that very basic border of single crochets all along my neckline. As I mentioned earlier, I did change where I wanted to reattach my yarn. So I actually attached it to the center back panel. I started here and then just began working my way all across the V-neck opening. And for all of those who are a little bit curious on how to decide how many stitches to place, because we've been using double crochets for the entire body, I decided to place 2 single crochets across every double crochet. So as you can see, if I kind of zoom you guys in, we have these double crochet rows right here, but then I placed 2 single crochets across every double crochet. And then likewise, as I come down here to the V-neck portion of the top, remember that I did chain 1 in between attaching both of these panels. So after working my 2 single crochet across every double crochet, here at the center, I just worked 1 single crochet directly into that center stitch. And then I carried on with 2 single crochet up the side for every double crochet row. And then even here at these like little corners of the top, I actually worked 3 single crochet all into this one corner, and likewise 3 single crochet all the way into this very top corner. So overall, this is what the piece is looking like. And as I mentioned, it's time to go ahead and create the little chain that's going to kind of be strung through this open center of the top. Now, when it comes to making the chain, it's honestly just kind of a trial and error. Depending how wide or how thin you made your top, and also the stretchiness of your yarn, you kind of need to play around with how long your chain is going to be. So all I'm going to do is pick back up here with my yarn, create my little slip knot, and then once my hook is in, I'm just gonna start making very basic chains. And honestly, this could take a super long time, so just make that chain as long as you think that you need, and then we will begin stringing it up, and from there we'll be able to kind of size out and determine how much more inchage or yardage that you're going to need to string up your top. So I've just created a super long chain, as you can see. Now I don't necessarily measure this, but I do kind of just like to eyeball it. So what I'm gonna do is kind of just like hold it up like this, fold it in half, and I'm gonna estimate that in total, this is between 3.5 to 4 feet long. So at this point, what I like to do to figure out the sizing of my chain is I'll find the very center of my chain that I've created, and I'm just gonna align it along the center of the V-neck. And then I'm gonna pretend as if I am already lacing it up. So I'm gonna cross it over like this, pinch, gently cross it back over, pinch here, and then just repeat this all the way up the V-neck. Now again, depending on how many chains across your chest you would like, you're gonna need a longer chain, but for me, I like to keep it a little bit simple. So I'm just gonna kind of gauge about 1 inch apart between all of my chains right here. And then finally, as I start to approach the very top of my V-neck, you'll notice that I am just a little bit short of connecting it to the other corner right here. So I'm just gonna go ahead, reattach my yarn and chain just enough to reach this upper corner, and then just a couple more inches so that we have a little bit of a chain hanging off the very front of our top. But honestly, this is how I go through and kind of like estimate how long of a chain I need. So my process for stringing up the chain is rather simple. All I'm gonna do is bring through both of the ends of the chain at the very base of the V-neck. So I'm just pulling through that chain. And then next, what I'm gonna do is cross over one of the chains, find a random point to pull through the tail end, And then likewise, I'm gonna take the other end of the chain, find the corresponding row on the other side of the V-neck, and then pull it through. And then from that point, I just continue to crisscross the chains over each other and then match up the 2 points along the opening of the V-neck. And I'll just continue to do this all the way up until the very top of the collar section.